Hello everyone and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, we are going to talk about the executive appointments that are in progress on their way and what the overall structure may look at as Ineos instilled individuals who now run United and are United press ahead with their plans moving forward. I want to get in the habit of saying that, as I think moving forward, everybody will understand what that means. They are the decision makers. They are the ones making the calls. They're also a part of Manchester United officially and formally, as the company's house also confirmed Sir Jim Ratcliffe as a director in some filings yesterday. I want to talk about the manager situation, talk about the overall decision-making process with that and where it is today, clear up a few things, talk about some recruitment issues, as well as how the future of certain people is being clarified at this point in time. So let's get into it. All right, so obviously before we get started, as per usual, today's video is sponsored by SofaScore. Make sure to click the link in the description below or scan the QR code over that way. I always get it wrong. To download the app, one of the best apps for keeping up with game score, stats, and everything that you might need. I do have some interesting projects potentially coming up that I think by the beginning of April, I'll be able to announce that is actually really, really cool that our channel will be involved in. So I'll let you know more on that. But I just thought of it and thought, I'm going to start dropping some hints about it soon. But it's something I can't talk about yet, but it's actually really cool. Very excited about it. I think it's something that would be very interesting for all football fans. So definitely keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. Anyway, let's get into it. This isn't the right overlay, so give me 1 second. I don't know why it hasn't updated for me properly. Come on. There we go. That's the right one. There it is. That was my last one. Okay, executives. Let's talk about executives. Obviously, there's been some stories. So last week, I put on my video that they were ready to press ahead with appointments, and we're starting to work on their next stage of people to hire into this overall football structure. Obviously, you have the ongoing situation with Dan Ashworth. Omar Barada is doing the work that he needs to do, lining things up, all of that. I want to point out as well, because it's now been kind of indicated by some other people. I said this in the beginning, that one of the reasons Omar Barada, from my understanding, was selected was also due to his experience in the multi-club model, and potentially in the future having that apply to United, to the ownership, and that there could be expansions in the future in terms of what United are connected with, and in this case, yes, what Ineos as a group own overall, or Trawlers Limited, or however it's laid out. I believe that in a recent video, David Ornstein talked about that, about his experience in multi-club model, and that being one of the reasons that he was hired. So that is something just interesting that is not going to be important in the short term, but in the long term could be very big for the huge future of United, and the view that the multi-club model is the way moving forward to have the most success. And it does tie into the goal and plan for recruiting and focusing on younger players from around the world and being able to bring them in. So how does that have anything to do with any of this? It does, in a way, and I'll get to it. So obviously Omar Barada, CEO, Dan Ashworth as sporting director. Now, one of the things that Dan Ashworth has done, but also that Brighton did a lot of, involving other people too, was having a good line for recruitment to South America, and that's where you're looking at potentially, United wanting to do a lot better at bringing in players. They got Alexis McAllister, Moise Caicedo, things like that. There's a lot of talent in these areas that United have missed out on over the years, and some of them, like Julian Alvarez, who went to City, are in fact ready for those moves. So that is certainly something that they will hope that people like Omar Barada and Dan Ashworth can bring to the table and help them build for the long term as the proper networks to accomplish this. Moving beyond that, obviously Jason Wilcox, the structure, Omar Barada, CEO, sporting director, Dan Ashworth, I believe performance director, Jason Wilcox. There will be some involvement in recruitment, but there's been some indications, he's going to be somebody who's looking at the coaching, who's looking at how things are happening on the pitch. A performance director tending to be somebody who, is overseeing as well, obviously performance, but that comes down to fitness and training and coaching and all aspects of that. And is actually somebody who's there, are we getting our plan in place? Aside from recruitment, this is how we want to play. Is that happening on the pitch? Is that happening in training? Is that happening down into the academy? Are we properly getting that from top to bottom? And I believe that's what Jason Wilcox will be mostly responsible for as a recommendation of Omar Barada, and a lot of experience with that. I'll talk about the futures of some people later, like Darren Fletcher, but just as a mention, he's the current technical director, but that is the next position. And the technical director is, I don't know, there's been some debate whether there's like a head of recruitment or technical director. If you go off of James Ducker's article at the Telegraph, which I think is correct on this, it's more in line with what I've heard. That the technical director will be somebody involved in recruitment that will work with Dan Ashworth on aligning things. One of the views of the leadership is that there's a lot of really good people in United's departments. When you're talking about analytics, scouting, I know for a fact that they're very highly supportive of the project in the analytics department, the partnership with university that's been going on, and some of these things that have been happening. They do feel that there's been a lot of good identification of players and talents, but the decision-making process has been poor. And I think the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer interview today is interesting when you look at that they had information on Erling Haaland. Back in the summer, they signed Donny van de Beek. I know for a fact that they were looking at players like Kamavinga and Declan Rice and all of that, and ended up getting Donny van de Beek. Has nothing to do with the scouting. That has to do with the decision-making process above them. So the technical director will likely be the next person to be brought in, and that is an interesting name. Right now, obviously, it is Darren Fletcher, but he's not really doing that job. He's got kind of a bit more of a players and academy liaison type of position, and maybe he will move to that. But that is the next position that I expect. And you saw reports of Dougie Freedman. Now, Dougie Freedman, to me, isn't the name that I heard last week. It makes sense to me because I expect that the technical director / if you want to call him head of recruitment, maybe, I don't know, is going to be somebody very involved in recruitment, is going to be somebody who goes and looks at players, who watches them, who does that. And Dougie Freedman does do that. But so does the person that I heard. And it seems like there's a few good sources like James Ducker and otherwise saying it's not Dougie Freedman, which leads me to believe it's probably the person I've heard. And they are intended, based on his article, there's some hints in there for me, that on James Ducker's article that say that this individual will work with Ashworth on recruitment. And so I have a feeling it'll be somebody that Ashworth wants in that position, given, that they'll be, working together in tandem to properly align Manchester United's recruitment moving forward. And so I expect that'll be the next person brought up. But given you still have 2 people they're trying to hire that haven't even signed a contract yet, that are still in a job and all that, I don't know how much they want out until they're able to line it up. I don't think they want 3 sagas going on at once about the hiring process. But, obviously, Omar Barada, as has kind of been reporting now, is obviously doing things behind, while on gardening leave within the terms of what they're supposed to do and what he's allowed to do. And that'll be the case anyway. Decisions are not being made without people involved. Ineos have been planning on all of this for a long, long, long time. Okay, so hopefully that helps clarify a little bit of the structure of how things are expected to be laid out. Obviously, there could be more hirings when it comes to fitness, coaching, medical. They're still looking for a new chief physio or head physio, as well, to replace the departing Robin Sadler that we reported on, and other departments. But in terms of the main executive functions, I think that's it. When you look at the overall board, there's other names on there. There's Steve Brown in recruitment. There's things like that. A lot of these people may shift or leave entirely further way down. But I think those are the four major positions that they're looking for structurally to be the leadership for the football club at United and drive things moving forward. And I think they've got really good people in those positions and really good people lined up. Moving on to the manager. So, obviously, it's interesting because there's been a lot of, there's obviously a lot of talk this week about different things, conversations about how what he can do to save his job, whether the decision's already been made, things like that. I've been pretty careful with this for a long time, a long time on this situation, to not say things that would be inflammatory. And even as somebody that I'm not Ten Hag's biggest fan, I don't think he's done a particularly excellent job. I've got enough respect for the club and respect for the job itself to not want to cause problems, because it does cause problems. When you see reports about players don't believe the manager's going to be there and all that, either way, it can't be healthy for the situation, right? So I've been pretty careful about that. And, I've tried to keep it to specifically talking about the things that I think that he is doing incorrectly or the things that he's done well. And I think there's a lot more wrong than right at this point in time. But in terms of the situation, a couple things that I want to say about it. One is, there's a lot of debate that is sort of pointless about the whole thing and irrelevant. I've tried to say this a few times recently. I've seen a lot of arguments for Ten Hag that come down to, well, look at these managers who've turned it around, which is a bad argument because every manager who got sacked got a chance to turn it around and didn't. There's a few who did. But there's also a difference in how their progression was, and trying to compare completely different situations. Even still, performance of other people in other situations is not an indication that you're going to have the same result. It's like saying, Anthony has 0 goals and assists in the Premier League this season. If you found another player in history who had 0 goals and assists, you wouldn't say, well, some kid at 19 didn't have any goals and assists in the Premier League and turned it around, had a great career, so Anthony will. No, you'd have to look at someone on their own merit and on their own judgments and on their own qualities and what they have to bring to the table to decide all of that. And that would be objectively looking at all the evidence. But there's a lot of arguments that are made that are not really relevant to the decision-making process, and that's one of them. And that's why I bring it up. The arguments of, the injuries, things like that, it's all understood why he can't show he's a good manager this season. But they're not going to be the arguments that tell Ineos that he's the right guy, that tell United that he's the right guy moving forward. That's what I keep trying to tell people that they're not really understanding, I think. I think a lot of people do at this point understand that, but I think a lot of people don't. They're not looking at it as he's the manager and we're weighing up his negatives to positives to decide whether to sack him. They're not looking at it to say, should he get another year because they didn't hire him? That's not the thinking process. And the sooner that people can grasp that, I think you have a much more logical way of viewing the situation. View it more like, at the end of the season, there is no manager. Who's the next manager? Is it Erik ten Hag? if he was at a different club and he didn't have a good season because of all these reasons, they still would not be a good reason for a different club to say, at a step up, to say, oh yeah, that's our perfect guy. Those are not good arguments for him. So there may be good arguments for him. There may be good things that he's doing, but those are not them. But the point overall is this, and this is where it stands as of now. They're ready to make a decision on this, as far as I know. They have in mind really what they want to do with this moving forward. It's not reactive. It is not based on a few results. When a manager gets in a position where they might feel like they need a result to turn things around, they're already done. You don't recover from that, because that means the decision has already been made. One game isn't going to change that, if that were to be the case. It's not that type of situation, but it's also not reactive. I've been saying since, I think, November that he was not going to be sacked mid-season. I still don't expect him to be sacked mid-season. They've been very fair. And the reality of it is that they've been assessing this for a long time. I think it was back in September, October, I first brought up that they had contingency plans from the manager perspective. And they're looking at it and saying, if we need to change managers, we want to start lining this up. It's not reactive. If they make the decision, it won't be without the proper input of people involved in football decisions, because they've been working on the plans for this club since probably a year and a half now, since way before this deal got done. They've been assessing plans, talking to people, and lining up things and getting concepts of what would be the right moves. And the basis of the potential manager change has been, one, do we see enough this year and enough of an upward trend under Erik ten Hag to say we're losing progress by sacking him or by changing managers? And I think it's very debatable if we lose anything when you compare where we are now to where we are 2 years ago. There's not, I think that doesn't work in his favor. There's not any clear progress that we would be losing by changing managers. Certainly not that clear progress in terms of personnel. And the other factor was always whether he was the right guy for the job, for what they viewed the job as, which was a bigger factor and had less to do with performance and results. And this I have maintained for a long, long time. They want someone who is totally in line with the way they view the manager job. There's an article from The Athletic last night from Mark Critchley that I thought was decent. There's some parts of it that I would say that you might want to check out because they're not correct, which were, he was talking about why they shouldn't sack him mid-season, all of that. Most of that is totally true, and they were never going to sack him mid-season. That was never the plan. They always hoped to never have to do that. But, and then it mentioned that they may just see the manager job as a different idea, and that's why it might change in summer. Totally correct. Totally correct. But then it kind of indicated that they were not thinking about potentially a manager change a long time ago, and that starts to paint the picture that this would be a reactive decision. It's not. That is not true. They have been assessing the manager situation since before they got in, well before they got in. And in part because they're so unhappy with the way that things have been running, the setup, the agreements, the things that are in ten Hag's contracts with regards to how is his control over recruitment and things like that. That has been a problem for a long time that I have brought up, and has even originally led to them thinking he may not be the right person, because those were things he asked for. Those were things he demanded in order to take the job, and they will not be having that. So I'm trying to present this as a balanced situation and do a few things. One, to put it really succinctly, yeah, they've likely probably made a decision at this point moving forward as to what they're going to do. It's not really results-based. There's some of that, but it is not a reactive decision. There's a lot of factors that go into the thinking with this that have been coming for a long time. And a biggest part of it is whether he's the right guy to lead them for the next 3 years. And that applies with performance, but it also applies with the way that they want to run things at the club. And those are the factors in there. I don't think there will be anything major public put out while United, either way, while United are still moving forward towards potentially an FA Cup and still, while technically Champions League qualification is still on the table. So I'm trying to be fair over the situation and present it, but this is not going to be some reactive, owner sacking a manager just because results are bad if they decide to change Ten Hag. That is 100% not the case, and it is totally and utterly incorrect to suggest that that would be the case. That's just it, okay? In terms of recruitment, they have started already on the recruitment process. There are things that they're already working on, players they're already working on, and I would say that for the first time in a long time, famous last words, so we'll see how this plays out in summer. But for the first time in a long, long time, I believe that they are working on names very specifically on the basis of that have been identified by scouts and analysts quite directly as the best players for the club, and that they are already started on that. And that is good news. They're not being held up on the basis of waiting for Dan Ashworth. And that's, again, same as the manager thing when it comes to recruitment. It is wrong to say that it's going to be done incorrectly just because Dan Ashworth isn't there. They're well aware of how this is going to go down. They're well aware of the way that things have been run and planned out. And they have plenty of very smart people involved in this process to make sure that the decisions are good in the meantime. In terms of futures, the other thing that is happening at the moment is there are people within the club who are having their futures clarified, including Dan Fletcher, even including people in the general more coaching areas, people in recruitment areas and such as well. They are starting to have their futures clarified as to where they might settle, what role they might take up if they move from their current role at United, and if they will be here next year. This is, as I get it, March, as I've maintained, the month that they're going to start moving ahead these decisions for next year, and that includes on staff and situations as well. So I expect we will see some clarification on things that may happen as they push ahead with the appointments of the executives, as well clarification on some of the people already in existing positions like Darren Fletcher. There's people, again, that they think are pretty decent people that might move in positions but not be let go. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case with Darren Fletcher as well. But yeah, there's going to be quite a few others that their positions are being clarified. So it's kind of it's a bit, this is a process. It may appear a bit messy, but it's pretty methodical in how they're going about approaching this whole thing. They have a series of steps, and they've been preparing for this a long time. They're not really set back by the concept that they might have to wait for certain people to arrive. This is a long-term situation. So anyway, hopefully today's video provided a bit of clarity on a few things, and in terms of what's happening now. And I think that we'll be able to get into the specifics over, the next couple weeks or so. I think we'll start to really nail down the specifics of exactly how this is going to take shape, and in terms of executive structure, in terms of manager, and in terms of moving forward on recruitment processes. So thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, and I'll see you in the next one.